A boat, smaller than a house, a crew you can count on two hands, and a job that means dragging something 100 times their size across an open ocean for weeks with no land in sight. This is the smallest, loneliest, and arguably most dangerous working boat at sea. And some of the people who live on it never want to come home. Here's what life is actually like aboard an ocean-going tug. When most people picture a tug, they think of the little boats nudging ships around a harbor and going home for dinner. This isn't that. Deep-sea tugs are a different world. They cross entire oceans, towing oil rigs, broken-down ships, even other tugs, thousands of miles from anywhere. The crew, often just 6 to 10 people living shoulder to shoulder on a vessel you could walk across in seconds for weeks, sometimes months. It's the most extreme version of life at sea there is. The smallest space, the tightest crew, the biggest loads, and some of the highest stakes on the water. Stay with me, because the reason some of them never want to come back to land is the part that surprises people most. Start with the size. A big cargo ship gives each crew member a private cabin and long corridors to disappear down. A tug gives you none of that. Bunks are stacked close. The mess, the galley, the wheelhouse, your bed, all within a few steps of each other. There is nowhere to go to be alone. The same handful of faces, every meal, every watch, every day for the entire voyage. It sounds like a recipe for going mad. And for the wrong person it is, but for a tug crew, that forced closeness becomes the whole point. You don't have colleagues out here. You have a family you can't escape, and after a few weeks can't imagine living without. And with so few people aboard, no one really rests. On a big ship, a large crew shares the load. On a tug, 6 or 8 people have to cover every single job, every hour, forever. The watch system is brutal. A few hours on, a few hours off, around the clock, with no spare bodies to cover you if you fade. Sleep comes in short, broken pieces, snatched between watches while the boat bucks underneath you. After a few weeks, a strange exhaustion sets in. The kind where you're never fully asleep and never fully awake, just permanently somewhere in between, running on coffee, routine, and the knowledge that the person in the next bunk is every bit as tired as you are. Then there's the movement. A giant ship is so heavy it barely notices small waves. A tug notices everything. It's tiny, it's light for its power, and the sea throws it around like a cork. It pitches, it rolls, it slams. On a rough night, simply staying in your bunk is a workout. You wedge yourself in with an arm and a leg and hope. Making coffee becomes a two-handed mission. Veterans develop a permanent sailor's walk, swaying through doorways without thinking, because the floor is never, ever still. New crew are often violently seasick for days. The sea doesn't care. The tow has to keep moving. But here's the strange magic of a tug. This little boat, smaller than a house, can carry tens of thousands of horsepower, enough to drag a ship hundreds of times its own size. Below deck, almost the entire vessel is engine. A tug is essentially a giant motor with just enough room bolted on top for a crew to live. It's the ant that drags the elephant, a small, snorting, overpowered machine built for one purpose, to pull. When you stand on deck and watch a line stretch tight between this little boat and a towering rig disappearing over the horizon behind it, it looks impossible. It isn't. It's just an ordinary day at work. If you're the kind of person who's ever looked at something huge and wondered who's actually out there making it move, you're going to feel right at home here, because from this point on it gets stranger, and that tow is the whole job. Picture dragging an oil rig, or a dead 200-meter ship, across thousands of miles of ocean at not much faster than walking pace. A single crossing can take weeks. The tug crawls forward day and night, the load following far behind on a steel line longer than several football fields. The crew watches that line obsessively because everything depends on it. Too much slack, too much tension, the wrong angle in a wave, and the whole job and the whole crew can be in trouble in seconds. It's slow, relentless, and never ever boring, because the moment you relax is the moment the ocean reminds you who's really in charge. And the single most dangerous part of the whole job isn't the crossing. It's the moment they connect to the tow in the first place. Hooking a heavy line between two vessels moving on the open sea is a violent, delicate operation. Massive shackles, whipping cables, tons of gear swinging across a deck that's pitching under your feet. It often happens in bad weather, because bad weather is exactly when a ship needs rescuing. The crew works out in the open, soaked and freezing, inches from equipment that could crush a hand or sweep them overboard in a heartbeat. Get it right, and the tow begins. Get it wrong, and people get hurt. The crossing might take weeks, but it's those few minutes of making and breaking the connection that keep them awake at night. Which brings us to the part nobody outside the industry talks about. That towline is the most dangerous thing on the boat. Under tow, it carries unimaginable force. If it parts, it doesn't just drop. It whips back across the deck like a steel blade, fast enough to kill. Crews know exactly where the danger zone is, and they do not stand in it. And there's a worse nightmare, one with its own name: girding. If the tow drags a tug sideways and it can't recover, the little boat can be pulled right over and capsized by its own load, in seconds, sometimes before anyone can react. It's the oldest fear in the trade. A boat built to pull, pulled under by the very thing it was towing. So how do a handful of people live in a space this small? Together, completely. There's rarely a dedicated cook on a tug. People take turns, or one person who's quietly good at it becomes the heart of the boat. The galley is the size of a small kitchen, and it doubles as the living room, the meeting room, and the only warm social space there is. Meals here aren't a routine. They're the glue. 6 or 8 people crammed around one small table, eating, arguing, laughing, riding out the same storm. On a tug, you don't just work with these people. You live inside their lives, and they live inside yours. And then there's the reason some tugs exist at all: salvage. When a ship is dying out there, engines dead, taking on water, drifting toward rocks, it's often a tug that races to save it. Here's the wild part. Traditional salvage runs on a rule called no cure, no pay. Save the ship, and the reward can be a fortune. A share of the value of everything you rescued. Fail, and you may walk away with nothing at all after risking your boat and your lives. So a salvage tug is part rescue vessel, part lottery ticket. Crews will sail straight into the storm everyone else is fleeing, betting their own safety on saving someone else's. Win, and a single job can pay for months. Lose, and you sailed into hell for free. Most of the time, though, it isn't drama. It's waiting. Ocean tugs spend long stretches simply standing by, holding position near a rig, escorting a load, ready for a job that might come in an hour or in a week. So the days settle into a rhythm: watches, meals, maintenance, the endless hum of the engine, the same horizon. It's monotonous. And somehow it's also the thing they miss most when they're gone, because out here, life is simple. You know exactly who you are, exactly what your job is, and exactly who's standing beside you. And that's the answer to the question we started with. Why would anyone choose this, the smallest space, the worst motion, the constant danger, weeks from home? Ask them, and they rarely talk about the money or the machines. They talk about the quiet after a tow comes in safe. The handful of people who became closer than family because there was no one else for 1,000 miles. The strange, clean simplicity of a life stripped down to the sea, the engine, and each other. Some describe it almost like an addiction, that the longer they stay ashore, the more they ache to be back out on the water with that handful of people. Land, when they finally get back, can feel too loud, too still, too complicated. And a part of them is already listening for the engine again, already counting the days until they can go back out to the loneliest boat on the ocean, the one place that somehow feels like home. So that's life on an ocean-going tug. A handful of people in a boat smaller than a house, thrown around by the sea, dragging giants across the world, one snapped, line away from disaster, heading and bonded so tightly that solid ground starts to feel like the strange place. The next time you see a tiny tug pulling something impossibly huge, remember the 6 or 8 people living their entire lives inside it, out where no one is watching. If you want to keep going, the next one is even wilder. The salvage crews who climb aboard dying ships in the middle of the ocean and live on top of a sinking wreck and somehow survive it. That video's right here.